It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, Don. It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
Yeah. The man of scarlet and gray. Yeah. Let's go. The man of scarlet and gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rocking with? The man of scarlet and gray. Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for love? The man of scarlet and gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rocking with? The man of scarlet and gray. Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for love? The man of scarlet and gray. It's time for it. You ready for it? It's MotSaG. You better know it. It's Go Bucks. Every time. Hating on us. You ready?
Your undisputed source of all things Ohio State. This is the Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Here's your hosts, Shannon Summers and Chip Minnick.
The Men of Scarlet and Gray.
Buckeye Nation, welcome to a special edition of the Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel. I'm Shannon Summers of menofscarletandgray.com.
And I'm Chip Minnick of menofthescarletandgray.com.
Today we had the honor of discussing Ohio State, Buckeyes, and college football with the man who has a voice that will make a Wolverine purr on a show that enjoys making the Wolverines cry. But before we talk with the man, the myth, the legend that is, we just want to quickly remind you to download the Buckeye Sports Radio app in either the Apple App Store or in Google Play Store. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Bill King. We'd like to welcome Bill King to our show. How are you doing today, Bill?
Hey, guys. Thank you. Doing fantastic.
Awesome. Let's get into it here. Ohio State offense right now is obviously having a identity issue. Their defense has been stellar, and what's scary is it can actually get better. Defense wins championships. Buckeyes proved that in 2002. Do you feel the Buckeyes might have one of the best defenses in the country?
I think it's good enough to win a national championship. Comparing it to other teams in the country, I don't know if, for example, at the interior defensive line spots, they're as stout as they were a year ago. With the Michael Bennett, obviously Joey Bosa speaks for himself. But I'm not sure they're where they were a year ago there, nor will they be. Now, is that group good enough to win another championship based on the overall team? Yeah. There's, I think at linebacker and on the back end, they're probably better. So it's probably a wash.
Bill, it surprised me that Cardale Jones was named the starter by Coach Meyer at quarterback to start the season. Do you think, we should know probably in about another hour or so, but do you think Urban Meyer is going to be making the switch to JT Barrett at quarterback?
I think so. Now, let me say this. In the midst of everybody saying in the, let's say August camp, leading up to the Virginia Tech game, that pretty much the overall consensus was that JT Barrett would start. And I said from the beginning, even though I was swayed a little bit by what you were hearing at camp, that Cardale Jones would start based on this. JT Barrett was coming off an injury, even though we know he was there and healthy in camp and everything else. And Cardale Jones was the last guy to have it. And not only did he succeed, but he succeeded in an incredible way. He played well. And they won the national championship. And people were even discussing maybe you ought to just go ahead and turn pro and cash in, which was obviously premature. But that's the kind of momentum he had. So I thought the fair way would be give Cardale Jones the ball first and see what he does with it based on the most recent sampling we got in a game that mattered, in a game that counted. I also said that I didn't really think it mattered either one, because they've proven they can win with either one. It's not like we better get the right one or we won't win. And that was going into the season. So I didn't think it mattered, but I thought Cardale Jones probably ought to get it first. And yes, it seems like JT Barrett is going to get it next and they'll make the switch.
Listening to your show today, you had Mike Griffith of M Live on talking about Michigan State. Right now, Ohio State and Michigan State are ranked as the top 2 teams in the country. And I realize there's a danger for both teams to look too far ahead to November 21st when the teams meet up in Columbus. But do you see a possibility that if the game is close, I'm not gonna say who's gonna win, but if the game is close, that both teams can make it into the 14 playoff, even if the loser is not a conference champion?
Yes. Now again, I'm saying it's possible. I'd be foolish to predict it right now because there's so much, as we know, that can and will happen. I mean, the SEC looks kind of messy right now. Alabama's already beaten, and they're the favorite, you would think. Ole Miss look good there. LSU is a little better than I thought, just overall. Brandon Harris is better than I thought overall. That's the main reason. Georgia has always got talent. Typically, they'll underachieve a couple times somewhere, maybe Tennessee or something. Florida game. How'd they lose to Florida last year? Makes no sense. So again, not to go over the whole league, but the rest of the landscape would have to help them out. You'd have to have a mess in the Big 12. But yeah. I mean, last time we were having this discussion, it was the early years of my Sirius XM show, and it was 06. And Michigan and Ohio State played there at the end, and you guys know it was 1 versus 2. Right. And the conversation we had, I mean, for at least a week around the clock on that show was, could Ohio State and Michigan play in a repeat game? As we know, they didn't, but it'll be interesting in 2 Big Ten teams. What if it's 2 Big Ten teams and not an SEC team? That'd be even bigger.
I worry for your airwaves down in Nashville, since you are an SEC country. What that what you be dealing
Correct.
with, but with we'll be talking about the SEC in a minute. But I since you have a national show, looking at the Big Ten so far this season, and you're right, it's very early. There's a lot of football to be played, but which team has surprised you the most in a positive way, and which team has surprised you in a disappointing way as it relates to the Big Ten?
Northwestern. I'm a huge Pat Fitzgerald fan, but Northwestern, obviously their young quarterback has looked fantastic. And on the negative side, I would have said Penn State. I want to temper that a little bit. I think people are expecting too much too soon. Hackenberg has been a disappointment. That's fair. I don't care if they're blocking for him or not. He's been a disappointment. Let me think. Anybody else? I'm excited in what I see in Michigan early on with Harbaugh. Illinois is pretty much Illinois. Purdue's bad. Oh, boy. If you asked me a week ago, I would have said on the downside, Penn State.
Okay.
Speaking of the Big Ten and everything, with the new head coaches that have been coming over, Urban Meyer here for Ohio State, Franklin at Penn State, Riley at Nebraska, and Paul Chryst at Wisconsin. Do you see the national narrative starting to change, hopefully, and the conference getting a little bit stronger with the new coaches?
No question. Harbaugh is going to have that program where, once again, the Michigan and Ohio State game is going to be riveting. Now, it might not be this year, maybe 2 years, 3 years, but that's going to happen. That there is no question that's going to happen. Mark D'Antonio will keep on being underappreciated, even by people like me, and probably keep on doing what he's doing. James Franklin's going to recruit well. I don't know if we know enough about him as an overall head coach to put him in the category of the others I just mentioned yet. But I do know he'll recruit A-list guys, and he's got that true freshman running back who's been fantastic. Now, Riley, I don't think that was a good hire. Now, Bo, you guys know Bo's one of my boys, so there's a little bit of a bias there. I get it, and Bo needs to go. For both of them, I would call that an amicable divorce. They did not upgrade as a coach, though, with Riley, and I think what you saw with Bo, I think Bo won 9.5 games a year. Nebraska probably win 8, 9 games a year with Riley, but it won't be an upgrade as far as the overall record.
I agree with that.
I do too. So speaking of Coach Meyer, one of the things that I love about your show, the nicknames for Urban Meyer on your show, you have the Pontiff, Ashtabula Jesus. Do you have a preference? Do you have a preference with the nicknames? Because this is more for our audience. For the people that aren't familiar with it,
right?
It's not meant in a derogatory sense.
No.
The Ashtabula Jesus thing usually is more like around recruiting, right?
Well, I just think it was. let me say this. The pontiff thing, I just, on this Sirius XM show a few years ago, just started that. But it actually happened here locally because it irritated the Tennessee fans so much that I thought it was hilarious. Even though I pulled for Tennessee growing up, I still thought it was funny as heck. So we kind of rubbed in the whole pontiff thing, exploiting, I should say, his overall aura to the point where it's ridiculous by calling him the pontiff. That was the whole point there. Actually, what happened with Ashtabula Jesus was Black from Cleveland, Ohio, who I'm sure you've heard, called in one day and
many
just out of the blue,
times.
he just started screaming, Ashtabula Jesus. I never even heard that. And you know what I said? I thought, I'm stealing that, and I probably never will give you credit for that, which I just did. So that's what happened there. To me, that's fresher. I mean, I try to use them both and sometimes not use them at all, just so you're not pounding people to death with it. It's mainly used as an irritant to the enemies, though.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about Black, time permitting, because definitely he's a fan favorite from a fellow audience member.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, that as we stated, you're located out of Nashville. So some of the games in the SEC this weekend with conference play starting to kind of ramp up all across the country. You have Tennessee at Florida, Mississippi State at Auburn, Missouri at Kentucky. Auburn already has the one loss. I mean, in your estimation, do you think they're done? And I guess as far as, Tennessee, how critical of a game is this for Butch Jones at Tennessee after the way Tennessee lost to Oklahoma?
Auburn's done if the conversation is national Final Four talk, playoff talk. They're switching to Sean White, and they think maybe this will be 2013 when they lost to LSU early, and then Nick Marshall kicked in. They started winning. That's not happening. The overall roster is not in that condition. Huge for Butch Jones. Now, not life or death from coaching, but the fan base, this is 10 years. Tennessee hasn't beaten them since 03 and 04. And we could say beginning in 05 when Urban Meyer got there, they were playing against, obviously, teams that were good, and Philip Fulmer was fizzling out then. But regardless, it's been tough. But the Tennessee fury over Florida goes back to the 90s. Steve Spurrier's an East Tennessee guy and played his high school ball in East Tennessee and then opted in the 60s to go to Florida because they threw the ball in Tennessee didn't, and he won a Heisman Trophy down there. And, we all know his coaching story, at least until now, it's been pretty good. So he was at Florida all those years. He had all that talent, and they used to beat Tennessee, and they talk about beating Tennessee before the game and then laugh at him after the game. It was just the source of a lot of frustration. Tennessee got the monkey off the back in 98 winning the national championship, but most of that decade was controlled by Florida. Now Florida's on another 10-year run, and they're not as good as they were then, nor is Tennessee. So it's big. I wouldn't say it's life or death for Butch, but it's the biggest game, and Tennessee fans are treating it much bigger than I think they ought to. They're treating it like Butch has got to go if he loses, which won't happen.
I guess just a quick follow-up on the SEC East. Missouri, being a transplanted team into the SEC, do you think Missouri can do it again in the SEC East this year?
I said no the last 2 years. I'll say no now. So maybe that's good news for them. The only way they do it, guys, is if others fall off. If the SEC East is right, Missouri doesn't win, and they don't win it the last 2 years. Florida is epic levels of down. Now, they're rising again. Now, how quickly, I think that's debatable, but they're rising again slowly. Tennessee hasn't been right for a while. Georgia has the best personnel year in and year out, but they'll underachieve a game or two, even though they blasted Missouri twice. I mean, to the point of it was over at halftime. And that was just a measurement of personnel. So, no, I don't think Missouri will do it again. No.
Do you think that Nick Saban cost his team a win by not starting with Jake Coker? And do you think that the Bateman experiment might have cost him a playoff spot?
Well, Bateman's done. I don't think they'll go back to him unless all else fails. Coker, I think they're just going to put Coker in there and let him fail forward, meaning make your mistakes. Hopefully we don't have to lose anymore while you're going into this. And, again, he's a fifth-year guy, so we're not talking about a baby here. Look, Alabama last year lost to Ole Miss and got in the playoffs. If they went out, they're probably in. I mean, just think about it. They went all the way through, which would include an LSU game. By the way, they play at Georgia next weekend. That's huge. I mean, that is really big. Remember the SEC championship game 3 years ago? Georgia was good enough to win the national championship that year. That's the year Alabama beat Notre Dame in the title game down in Miami. But no. Alabama wins out, and it's all good. And they're good enough to win out. But right now, they got no clue as to what to do with the quarterback other than just let Coker have it. They do not want to bring out Blake Barnett right now, who's my favorite guy, a 5-star freshman. They'd like to redshirt him.
Well, you mentioned, your longtime show. I know you were not a fan of the playoff, before it was unveiled. I guess the question I have is, do you see? There's all these rumors about expansion, like with, teams being poached from the Big 12. Do you think expansion is done? And I guess the follow-up to that is, do you think the 14 playoff is going to expand before the original contract expires?
I learned during that summer of expansion terror where every day you got up, it sounded like Texas and Oklahoma had further sharpened their big sword, and they were leaving. And that would have meant, for example, Baylor and Kansas and Ames, Iowa, those places would have been homes as far as a likewise type conference. People weren't going to gobble them up. So once that happened, and then, of course, SEC bringing in Missouri and things like that, all the different West Virginia going to the Big 12, which they're geographically kind of odd. That's a very odd one. But, yeah, I learned never say never, and I already knew never say never, even though I pretty much thought never then. I don't think we'll have anything like that, but goodness knows. And for the playoff, oh, absolutely. They won't make it to 2020. It's a 12-year contract, as you know, so we're on year 3. They won't make it to 2020 without expanding to 8. I don't think.
Do you think it'll stop at 8, or do you think? Obviously you've seen all the people that want to make it as big as possible.
Sure, it'll stay there for a while, but once you cross that line, then it's game on. And then eventually you'll have, and again, I'm just throwing random thoughts out, but you'll have 20, 30 years down the road, you'll have a wild card. It'll be kind of silly, but yeah, it's going in that direction. They pretty much are going to start treating these guys like employees regardless, and they're paying them, and that pay is only going to go up too. So yeah, it'll happen.
So one of the reasons I really enjoy listening to your show is, how respectful you are to all of your guests and callers that you have on your show. For example, the other day you had Dave Biddle of Bucknuts.com, and you have him on frequently. We talked about the aforementioned Black from Cleveland, on Talking Ohio State. I just wanted to give you a theory on, SEC as it compares to the Big Ten. And it's,
sure.
and it's, if I had to scout one position group where the SEC is truly dominant in comparison, it's along the defensive line. And for example, Urban Meyer's really focused on a lot of recruiting defensive linemen from south of the Mason-Dixon line, like Joey Bosa and Tyquan Lewis and Michael Hill. And Ohio State already has, for example, Joey Bosa's younger brother, coming in with the 2016 class. What's your thoughts on the whole SEC Big Ten comparison? Where does, in terms of, the idea, because obviously you're in SEC country, where is the dominance lie? Is it along the defensive line the way I think, or is it completely different?
I think that's one of them. More athletic, twitchy defensive linemen in numbers. Obviously, Joey Bosa, and we can pick out individuals. Shalik Calhoun, Malik McDowell is developing like that. Endless group. But I think in the SEC, you've got more shapes and sizes, and you've got more of your sturdy inside guys, and then you have the defensive ends that are just off the chart wicked, which the new group is Myles Garrett and Derek Barnett and names like that. Byron Coward at Auburn, who's just a freshman, who's got some growing to do, but he perhaps will be one of those guys as well. I think that's one of them. I don't think quarterback play has been anything special. Perhaps it's been below par at some points during the last 10, 15 years. Some years it peaks up, some years it's not. maybe athletically at some of the skill positions, that's probably more debatable. But the big separator, and I've known Jerry DiNardo, for example, since he was here at Vanderbilt and came over when he was at Colorado to be the head coach at Vanderbilt beginning in 89-90. He's been at Vanderbilt, LSU, Indiana, various places, and he says the same thing. It's the defensive front. Typically, that's the separator.
What are your thoughts on why the SEC won't play home and homes with like the Big Ten? They're always griping about the Big Ten strength of schedule and everything, and once in a while we'll get some good games going. It seems like they've canceled a lot more lately. Why won't they let their players come up above the Mason-Dixon line and enjoy Big Ten country?
Probably a little bit of arrogance. Probably a little bit they don't have to. I mean, they've owned the joint. I mean, think about all the serious legislation we've had. We've got a playoff because of the SEC.
That's true.
We've got a playoff because of the commissioner of the SEC, the past commissioner, who was pushing and pushing. We're paying players because he threatened to succeed from the NCAA. If not. And the NCAA obviously has got to buckle because they got no power. Delaney was more like me. He wasn't all jacked up about a playoff, but he understood I'm going to have to go in this direction. And so he went in that direction. So I think it's more power, and we don't have to. It's kind of like we've made the rules, and we're not going to change them. Eventually, you may see some of that. You'll see more of those. Let's play in Houston games or what have you. Those are all scheduled up. But home and away, Alabama and East Lansing, for example, we've talked about that before, but that ain't happening.
Right.
It'd be nice to see, them come to like the shoe or something like that. Enjoy, a really big, powerful game.
Yep.
Like I said, I love listening to your show throughout the year, but I'm not gonna lie to you. None more so than on National Signing Day in February. Seriously, it is without a doubt. I love the use of the term we were talking earlier about Ashtabula Jesus and the Pontiff, but on National Signing Day, Johnny Five Star. You have your recruiting analysts and coaches on your program to talk about the incoming recruits at the various schools. I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on the players who make it a real big, spectacle with the hat, selections, or, like, for example, a few years ago, Isaiah Crowell, he brought a bulldog puppy to announce he was signing with Georgia. I mean, what are your thoughts on that whole, are you more of just kind of, why don't you just announce where you're going and be done with it? Or do you like the spectacle part of it?
I'm part old school, new school. Depends on the topics. Obviously, if you're talking about playoffs, you guys know I'm certainly in a minority. I'm old school, but I'm okay with it. Does it get to the point where it's a little bit irritating? Yeah. First guy that did it was a guy named Lorenzo Booker, who was receiver, running back out of California that everybody on the planet would die to get. It turned out to be not very good. Went to Florida State and was not maybe average, but anyways, yeah, I mean, I don't mind it. It doesn't irritate me, but some of the stuff that's overboard, families get involved a little bit too much, probably irritates me a little bit.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time, so we have one final question for you, and this is since we're talking more for our the benefit of our fans who may not be as knowledgeable about us, some of the things that are discussed on your program, and that is you have an affinity for Natty Light, which is the beer with the taste for food. So I guess this is more, for our audience's benefit. Ideally, what is the taste for food when enjoying that nice ice cold Natty Light? Is this where your brisket, the love of brisket, comes into play? Or
I learned Natty Light from my father-in-law, my now deceased father-in-law, God rest his soul, who was so cheap when we'd go to his house, me and my wife. He would have Natty Light there, and the little sticker on the thing would, it'd be a 12-pack. It'd say like $5.98 or something, 12-pack. So, and it got to the point where when I'd go over there, I'd have a couple, and I just got over the rank taste if you use them more, So it kind of became more of a joke. than anything else, Natty Light, because you're always going to get responses from that, and typically they're not positive. There's nobody checks better. In fact, you're actually making a fool out of yourself by bragging about it, which to me is self-deprecating humor. I think takes the edge off a little bit, because sometimes I might come off with my voice and my presentation as a guy that's super confident, which I am, but I don't want it to sound like I feel like I'm commanding the only opinion out there. And, a lot of self-deprecating fun things and let your hair down on topics like Natty Light. Those, I think, bring things to a little more even keel. We have fun with it. I haven't probably had a Natty Light in a couple of years, but I might have one after you and I talk. I'm thirsty.
That's outstanding.
There you go.
What a way to end it.
Yes. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show and joining us. It was such a great honor. And where can folks that are tuning into our podcast and haven't heard your show catch your show at?
I think the best thing to do is just go to Twitter @BillIsKing, and hopefully it's all self-explanatory there. There's a way you can stream me if you're up there, and listen to the shows and all kinds of stuff. So @BillIsKing on Twitter.
Definitely a great show to listen to. And don't forget, always have your brisket fat side up.
That's correct.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
thank
boy. You.
Shout at me anytime. I love being with you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's going to do it for us here on Men of Scarlet and Gray podcast on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel. You can listen and subscribe to our shows on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and, of course, Buckeye Sports Radio. You can follow Buckeye Sports Radio on Twitter @Buckeyes Radio. You can follow our show on Twitter and Facebook @MotSaG Podcast, MOTSAG Podcast. You can find my work on menofscarletandgray.com, knowitallfootball.com, and follow me on Twitter @SMSummers84. Chip, where can folks find your work and your Twitter?
Well, they can find my work on menofthescarletandgray.com, on athlonsports.com, my personal blog from themindofminnick.blogspot.com, and on Twitter my handle is @ChipMinnick. My last name is spelled MINNICH.
We want to thank Bill King for joining us. It was such a great honor having him on our show. You can follow him on Twitter @BillIsKing. And you can catch his show on Nashville WNSR Sports Radio Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, or you can catch it on SoundCloud, The Bill King Show. Thank you for joining us and listening. Have a great day. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.